Hello everyone. Today's case could be a tale of caution if you're a parent, and it is a scary one if so. A few days ago, Long Crime Network ended up releasing body cam footage after police arrested a 12-year-old after she had stabbed her little brother in the middle of the night. And after I watched that 25-minute video, I knew I wanted to talk to you all about it. But before we get into this, I want to warn you all that I do not want to see negative comments down below regarding the mother and the parenting style in this case, because from everything that I could see, there was nothing that the mother in this situation could have done differently. There were no real warning signs that something to this extreme could have happened, and I don't think the family needs any more negativity surrounding this case. There seems to be a lot of hate and a lot of speculation floating around out there, but I do think this is a really important case to cover, and I wanted to talk to you all about it. But I'm sure half of you have no clue what I'm talking about, so let's get into this case. April Lyda was a single mother of 3 children, and I read that they had different fathers, but I don't want people bashing April for this because I honestly don't think it's important to the story, but I just want to bring it up because, of course, as I said, there's so much random speculation and hate in this case that I think it's unfounded. Now, April's 3 children consisted of her 12-year-old daughter, who has been unnamed, a 9-year-old son named Zander, who is the victim in this story, as well as a 3-year-old son. And all of them lived in the downtown Tulsa, Oklahoma neighborhood of St. Thomas Square. Now, leading up to the night in question, Zander and his sister seemed, from all accounts, like normal siblings. They'd fight sometimes, but nothing wild, and I mean, when my brother and I were young, we used to fight all the time, so I don't think it's anything out of the ordinary for siblings to have little spats. But from everything that April has said, her children were just normal children and there was nothing wrong. They were just normal, good children. Now, recently, April has come out and said that her daughter was on ADHD medication and she was on it for around 5 years because she couldn't focus during school. But after 5 years of being on this medication, they ended up taking her off the medication, which was kind of a collaborative choice between her and her daughter because her daughter was starting homeschool and she didn't think she was going to need it anymore because she seemed to kind of mainly need it because she couldn't focus with all the other students in class. Now, a year and a half later, her daughter ended up going back to public school, and this is when doctors recommended she go back on this ADHD medication. But sometime after that, she began to cut herself, saying that she felt irritable and there were some other issues that were mentioned.
She said that she felt like she was really irritable, angry for no reason on the medication. So, of course, I took her off of it.
So after this happened, she was then taken off the medication again. Other than that, April says that her daughter was a normal, happy, energetic kid that loved school. She says she had no prior behavior problems. She's never yelled at her mother. She doesn't cuss. She's a normal, God-fearing child. Her daughter did admit during the body cam footage that she did sometimes babysit her younger siblings, but again, she was 12 years old. I don't think that's anything out of the ordinary. Again, I used to do the same thing when I was around that age. Let's talk a little bit about little 9-year-old Zander. Zander was said to have been the sweetest boy who had the biggest smile. He loved to ride his bike, play Fortnite, hang out with his best friend, or just run errands with his mom. He loved spending time with his dad and grandma, going on trips with his family, and his favorite places were Sky Zone, Incredible Pizza, and the Children's Museum. His favorite foods were cheese pizza, tacos, and chocolate ice cream. And it's said that he loved his big sister so much. But on January 5th of 2023, everything would change for this family. April's 3-year-old son ended up going to his father's home that night, leaving Zander, his big sister, and his mother in the home. As night fell, Zander ended up asking if he could sleep downstairs, which he usually didn't. He usually slept in his bedroom, but that night, April agreed that he could sleep downstairs. Turns out that Zander didn't have school the next day because he was actually transitioning to doing some homeschooling, but he didn't have his Chromebook yet, so he couldn't start classes. So it was one of those like, yeah, you can stay up late, hang out, like whatever. It seemed like a normal night. April would head off to bed with her 12-year-old daughter also sleeping upstairs, and everything seemed fine. But just before midnight, something horrific would happen. April would be woken up to Zander screaming. Thinking Zander was just having a nightmare, April ended up going downstairs to comfort her son, but once she found Zander and got to him, she realized that her 9-year-old son was covered in blood.
So this is completely...
He was in bed. He was downstairs trying to sleep. I don't know why she even went down there. Like, what the hell was she... I don't understand any of it. All I know is I heard him screaming. The worst scream ever, and I thought maybe he was having a nightmare, so I started to try to wake him up, and there's blood everywhere. And he said, she stabbed me. I was like, who? And he started going in and out of consciousness, and so that's when they told me to put him on the floor, do chest compressions.
April immediately called 911 and she began to do chest compressions as directed. And while all of this is happening, April is screaming for her 12-year-old daughter because she doesn't know where she was and she thought she could also be possibly injured if an intruder had gotten into the house and did this to Zander. Meanwhile, her 12-year-old daughter was actually hiding somewhere in the home in fear because of what she had just done. And this is where the police body cam footage starts, with police and paramedics arriving on the scene.
I'm so sorry.
Come here.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
We're just gonna put handcuffs on just for now.
I'm sorry, just please pull up your pants. I'm sorry.
Where's the knife?
Sorry, Dad. I'm sorry. I don't know what the fuck. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm sorry. Please. I'm so sorry.
April's daughter is screaming, I'm sorry, over and over again as police usher her out of the home. And I do want to say that the officers in this situation were very patient and very well suited for the situation, and they handled it amazingly considering the circumstances. As April's 12-year-old daughter is put into handcuffs, April is screaming that there are stab wounds in his chest, saying, and I quote, "You better pray to God he fucking lives," end quote. They eventually go on to figure out that a knife was used, and April is just beside herself in grief and confusion, trying to wrap her head around the situation that she woke up to. The 12-year-old over and over again continues to say that she is sorry and that she can't understand why she did what she did. It basically seems that the 12-year-old remembers doing what she did, but she doesn't know why she did what she did. Police eventually get her to show them where she ended up disposing of the knife, which she says she threw out of her bedroom window. Police then go on to check the young girl to see if she has any injuries on herself because, as we know during stabbings, the perpetrator can injure themselves with knife slippage in the blood. And when they end up checking her, they end up finding old cut wounds on her arms as well as a fresh one, but that one was not bleeding. Now, this has caused a lot of speculation in the public around what was happening with this 12-year-old girl. Was she thinking about, self-harm and things like that? And at first, April ended up firing back saying, and I quote, "I want to clarify something. My daughter was not a cutter. She had old cuts from 2 months ago prior when she first was put back on her meds, and everyone agreed to take her off of them immediately. And so I did, and unfortunately, it was too late and the damage was done. The new cuts were from the night she attacked my precious son," end quote. Now, in recent interviews, April has admitted, and she does kind of admit in that statement there that her daughter was self-harming, but it was because of the medication. And they immediately took her off the medication and she thought everything was fine. Now, as the footage goes on, it's very sad because the 12-year-old girl continues to ask if she's going to jail, saying things such as, I quote, "I ruined my life. I ruined my whole future. It's all my fault. I'm going to jail for the rest of my life. What I did was super illegal. I just want to wake up from this nightmare," end quote. The officers attempt to assure the 12-year-old girl that she's not going to go to jail and she needs to calm down. At one point, the officer does say if she was 13, she would be going to jail, but she's only 12 years old, so she's not. And as her daughter is being processed, April is at the hospital with her son, and police end up sitting down to talk to her, and I'm going to play some of that footage for you now.
Okay, appreciate it.
All right.
Item 142 today.
I'm sorry about that. That was my supervisor. But I said, I cannot imagine what you're going through right now.
She's never been aggressive or anything.
Yeah.
It's not like her. Like, it's like they bully each other like brother and sisters, but they never like fist fight or do anything like that.
So
It
this
was
is
just
completely.
He was in bed. He was downstairs trying to sleep. I don't know why she even went down there. Like, what the hell was she? I don't understand any of it.
It would later come out that Zander was actually not asleep when the attack occurred. He was actually awake, but there's still a lot of mystery surrounding what exactly played out that night because there's not much information on it that has been publicized. But that's kind of the whole confusion with this case. Why would this 12-year-old girl want to stab her little brother? Why would she want to kill her little brother? How could a little girl that seems so normal in a blink of an eye do something so drastic like this? With absolutely no warning signs, apparently. Now, despite doctors' efforts, at 2:30 a.m., Zander ended up succumbing to his wounds during surgery, and he ended up passing away. Zander's death would also mark the second homicide in the city of Tulsa for 2023. Now, as time has passed, because this happened about 6 months ago, April's daughter has been in custody getting help with a team of experts for the last 6 months since her brother died. April's also said that these experts have spent pretty much every day with her daughter for hours at a time, and she's gotten mental health evaluations as they decided a treatment plan, and according to her 12-year-old daughter, she has no idea why she did what she did. And April says that the doctors feel like she is telling the truth. April has also said that herself, including the doctors, feel like medication had a huge part to play in this, saying, and I quote, "All the side effects make sense now, although at the time we didn't know why they were side effects. She was treated as if they were separate issues," end quote. To this day, there has been no motive or reason to why the 12-year-old ended up stabbing her brother, but maybe there really isn't a solid reason if it was medication that caused this. Now, just recently, April was interviewed on News Nation, and this is when she finally came out and said for a fact that it was ADHD medication that her daughter was on. Now, it hasn't been released which specific ADHD medication that April's daughter was prescribed, but there has been articles on ADHD medications used to treat teens and adults that cause symptoms such as paranoia, hallucinations, delusions, and hearing voices. And this NBC News article reads, and I quote, "Researchers found that patients who have been newly prescribed amphetamines such as Adderall or Vyvanse were more likely to develop psychosis than those who received a prescription for things such as Ritalin or Concerta, according to the new studies published Wednesday by the New England Journal of Medicine. While psychosis with each class of medication is still relatively rare, occurring at a rate of around 1 in 660 patients, which honestly I still think is a lot, experts caution that patients should also know the increased risk. They also noted that the increased risk was only for those who had recently begun treatment in a new amphetamine prescription for ADHD, and that those who have been taking drugs or tolerated it well should not be concerned, end quote. So clearly there is a pattern where there are some children and teens who are given this medication and they do have side effects that can cause psychosis. I also seen some other stories of people online who have also had similar situations happen to them or their loved ones. One person saying that they felt like they wanted to kill their dog. Another person saying, and I quote, "My son was the sweetest, most non-violent child you could ever meet, but once his medication was changed, he literally almost stabbed my ex-mother-in-law, but thankfully his stepdad stepped in quickly enough to stop it. He couldn't explain why or what happened, and the doctors immediately stopped that medication, and he had never ever acted like that since, and he just graduated high school," end quote. So clearly there are studies where this has happened, and clearly there are real people out there in the real world who have said they've had similar situations happen. And if this did happen, if medication was allegedly the cause to this, I cannot imagine how shocking it could be that one moment everything is fine and the next moment you wake up to the situation that happened here. I just can't imagine it. However, there is another side to this argument, because it turns out that the 12-year-old technically wasn't on medication when she stabbed her brother. And it seems like her mother's trying to say that there was long-lasting effects because of this medication that caused this to happen. Now, that has also become under speculation because is that even possible? I personally don't know. I'm not a medical professional, but there is cause to question if her ADHD was properly diagnosed or if she actually had something else like bipolar, because apparently in children, it's hard to determine the two. But there's been a lot of questions. If she wasn't on this medication, how is she completely fine since her mother said there was absolutely no warning signs? She was a perfect child. She was a good child up until this incident happened. So how is she good and then snapped, did this, and then was good again? Because in the body cam footage, she seems pretty clear-minded. She seems to know what she did. She says she stabbed her brother. She knows that because she did that, it's a bad thing. She could go to jail. She seems clear-headed again. So can someone snap for just a brief moment and then go back to being normal again? Psychiatrist Dr. Arnold was actually brought on to the Long Crime Network to talk about this case, and this is what she had to say.
Dr. Arnold, what do you make of what April Lyda said?
I do not believe that the mother can assume that months off of a medication, it can trigger behavior in someone like this. Okay? The medicine is out of her system. The medicine does not last for a long time in her system. And the mother is assuming that that a medication went in and did harm to this little girl's brain. However, the mother was also saying that the little girl's behavior up to this point was fine. She was not exhibiting any bad behavior, and she's not exhibiting any bad behavior in prison. So why would you cannot say that this behavior comes and goes off of the medication? You would have more signs and symptoms of that. So I do not believe that the medication that she was off of caused damage to her brain. In other words, made her psychotic, which then made her kill her brother.
So what could be going on here? It's stunning to me that a 911 call is placed. She runs outside. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. She's apologizing profusely for what she did.
She knew what she did, didn't she?
It certainly appears so. So what do you make of that?
I have to wonder why the mother is talking so profusely about her good behavior. I wonder what that's covering up. So does that mean that she's had bad behavior in the past? And does this little girl have a different diagnosis? Is she bipolar? Sometimes bipolar disorder is confused with ADHD, particularly in very young children. Nobody wants to have their child diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but she could have a completely different diagnosis than ADHD, and that could also be why the medication was affecting her so poorly.
I have read that in the past, that bipolar disorder and ADHD can sometimes be confused for one another or misdiagnosed. But does bipolar disorder it does cause manic episodes, but does it cause one to stab someone repeatedly lying in their bed and then run out of the house apologizing about it?
Well, it's always going to be hard to determine what she was thinking at that time when this incident occurred. If she had become manic with her bipolar disorder, you would assume that there would have been signs leading up to this of her mania. Just sheer irritability would have been a sign that she was manic. Just irritability. It wouldn't have to be anything else. She could have been doing some risky things. But the mother continues to say that the little girl's behavior was good. It was good. So the biggest question I have in my mind is, what made her snap that night? I do not believe it was a medication. I have to wonder if the little girl was taking some sort of drugs that was in the house, or was she mad at her brother and wanted to kill him? That has to be in the differential diagnosis. Had something happened between her and her brother, and she wanted to kill her brother.
So an impulsive act.
Yes, an impulsive. We all know that most murders happen between loved ones.
Honestly, I think Dr. Arnold brought up a lot of good points. It really made me think. But at the same time, this is what April had to also say.
They did yoga together almost every night. They went on vacations together and trips together. They always sat next to each other. They were very close. She loved him and he loved her.
Was she able to tell you what led to her stabbing him?
She has no idea why she did it. She's heartbroken and feels very guilty, but she still doesn't understand why she did it. She said it was like it wasn't her. And the team of specialists working with her, they believe her after working with her for the last 6 months every day. And I believe her too, because I know my child and I know that wasn't her.
Was this part of a downturn or a spiral? Was there any other behavior that gave you any indication that the kid was unstable?
No. She was fine. She wasn't unstable until she was put back on the medication.
I just want to say right now that I do really, really feel for April. I can't imagine what she's going through. This is a horrific situation, but I also can't help to think that there might be more to this situation. Either way, it has to be a never-ending nightmare when one of your children kills your other child. We've seen it happen in the Claire Miller case. But if it is medication to blame, I can't imagine how traumatizing that would be to the 12-year-old who had this happen. If she was under some kind of psychosis or mental break and this happened, and then she comes out of it and realizes the gravity of what happened, I can't imagine that trauma for her as well. But we do have to keep in mind that she killed her little brother. We can't forget little Zander in all of this. He was just a happy little boy living his life. He didn't deserve his last moments to be that horrific. And there's no reason, there's nothing he could have done to deserve what happened to him. There should be no reason that he, in maybe a scenario, pissed his sister off by doing something and it caused her, because of whatever was happening in her brain, to do this. He didn't deserve this. Now, despite everything that has happened, April is actually hoping that she can reintroduce her daughter back into her home. But right now, she is a single mother living alone, raising her 3-year-old son. And because of all of these funeral and medical costs, April's friend has actually created a GoFundMe for her. So I'm gonna have that link down below in case you would like to donate to her. Because at the end of the day, this is a single mother who had something very horrific and tragic happen to her in her life. And she is struggling right now. And I think she definitely deserves some help. So if you do have $1 to spare, I'll have that link down below so that we can help support her. But what I do want to know is how you all feel about this. Do you think it could have been the medication, or are you swaying more towards that there was something else going on here? Honestly, before April did that interview, I was swaying a little more towards the medication theory, but now knowing that she wasn't on the medication when this happened, I'm honestly thinking there may be more to the story. I'm thinking that maybe it was a misdiagnosis, maybe there was something else going on in her head, maybe there was something more happening in her own life that caused this 12-year-old to act this way. But I do think that there's things being left out, or just things that we don't know. But this is definitely a case that I want to stay up to date on, and if there's any information, I will continue to keep you all up to date if you are interested in this case as well. But as of right now, that's all we have, so I'm going to leave it here, and I'm going to leave it all in your hands. So let's chat about it down below. Again, please stay respectful. And with that, if you have any other cases you want me to cover, also leave those down below, and I will definitely look into them. And also, if you're not subscribed, I definitely recommend you hit that subscribe button. It allows me to continue to create content like this, talk about cases like this, and spread the word on cases. I hope you all stay safe out there, lock your windows and doors, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.
Thank you.